In a world ruled by elves, proud and skilled in magic, the arrival of the Queen's human knights is met with laughter and scorn. Their armor is rough, their ways are unpolished, and their presence feels like a stain on the elegant elven city. But when a terrible darkness called the Blight threatens to consume everything, the elves discover that their magic is not enough. The humans, with their simple but strong steel and stubborn courage, become the unexpected defenders. This story is about pride, survival, and how different strengths must come together to face a growing nightmare. It is intense and full of fear, hope, and hard battles where magic fails but steel and will endure. The stakes are the survival of a world balanced between light and shadow. The city of Ezreal gleamed like a jewel under the pale light of twin moons. Towers of living crystal stretched high into the sky, their walls shining with magic that made them look like stars caught in stone. The streets were polished smooth, perfect for the delicate steps of elves who had walked them for centuries. But today, the city smelled of mud and sweat. Captain Roderick Holland led the Queen's Guard down the wide avenue called Living Crystal. His heavy boots slapped loudly on the flawless stones. Each step left dark, muddy marks that would take days to clean. Behind him, 47 knights moved with less grace than the elves hoped for. Their armor clanked and rattled, a noisy song of chain mail, leather, and steel plates rubbing together. The elves lining the streets wore robes like threads of moonlight. They watched with cold eyes, faces pale with shock and thin smiles of polite disgust. Some younger elves whispered and giggled openly at the rough, clumsy humans. Lady Tasman Vale, mounted high on her giant halberd, sighed as she saw the procession. "You'd think immortals would have better things to do than gawk," she muttered. Captain Roderick ignored the stares. His scarred face was hard as stone, his milky white eye scanning the crowd. "Let them laugh," he said in a voice like gravel crushed underfoot. "They won't be laughing when the real fight begins." Cobb, the smith of the guard, grunted as he ran a thumb over a smooth crystal ball held by one of the elves. "Don't trust anything that never needed fixing," he said. "Means it's never been tested in battle." The elves beside him exchanged quick looks. "Are they always like this?" asked one, voice low and unsure. "Every day," Lady Tasman said with a bitter smile. "And they're only just getting started." Ahead, the great palace doors opened without a sound. Silver and gold twisted into impossible patterns, catching and bending the light like liquid fire. Inside, the throne room was a marvel of frozen waterfalls, moving stars, and floors so clear they reflected the guards as if they were walking on water. Queen Cyrilline sat on a throne carved from a single pearl the size of a small house. She was the picture of perfection. Her silk robes shimmered with every color of the dawn, and her face was calm but cold, like a winter river under ice. Roderick stepped forward and removed his helmet. The scars on his face told stories older than many elves could imagine. "Your Radiance," he said, voice steady, "the Queen of Aldwyn sends her regards and renews her pledge of alliance." Queen Cyrilline's eyes narrowed. "We thank your queen for her words," she replied, "though we confess puzzlement at the need. The Accord of Moonrise has stood for 3 centuries. It is more formality than necessity." Before the conversation could continue, a young elf from the Queen's court interrupted. "Your Radiance," he said softly, "perhaps our human guests would be more comfortable in the servants' quarters. The smell is unpleasant." Tasman laughed quietly, tightening her grip on her halberd's reins. "Finish that sentence," she said, voice low but clear. "And I'll show you what happens when this unpleasant smell meets wickedness." The young elf's face twisted in amused horror. "Threaten violence in the Queen's Hall? How predictable." "Not a threat," Tasman said. "Just a weather forecast, cloudy with a chance of bisection." Roderick shot her a warning glance, but the Queen raised a hand. "Peace," she said. "Let us conclude this quickly. The alliance remains as it has always been. Though, truly, what need have we of human swords when elven magic has kept the darkness at bay for millennia?" Cobb scoffed quietly. "Magic's fine. Until it's not." The Queen's gaze sharpened. "Do you question our power?" Before Roderick could answer, the great doors exploded inward. Wood and silver splintered like dry leaves, crashing onto the polished floor. Through the wreckage stumbled a messenger, an elf, but twisted and broken. Half his face was gone, black veins pulsing with terrible life. His robes melted, revealing skin that seemed to crawl away from his bones. "Silverpine," he gasped, voice like drowning water. "Gone." The garrison, the towers, his body convulsed, eyes snapping open to reveal not a man, but something dark and empty. Magic dies, it whispered, voice like glass breaking. Flesh remains. The blight comes to feast. The messenger collapsed, leaving a growing stain of darkness that spread like ink on water. Panic erupted in the throne room. Elves scattered, spells flashing in desperation. But the Queen's guard stood firm, shields raised, weapons ready. Roderick barked, report. Cobb knelt by the fallen elf. Dead? No. Worse. His flesh is ash, but the ash doesn't fall. It hangs, shapes that burn to see. The Queen's perfect composure cracked. Silverpine lies 3 days' ride from here, she said. If it fell yesterday, the blight moves fast. Roderick bowed his head in respect. Forget pretty spells. You need steel. Real steel. We are here to help. A young elven officer stepped forward, magic crackling from his fingers. We are the heart of elven power. The blight fell Silverpine because they were unprepared. We will stand against it. The darkness at the messenger's side pulsed and grew. The ancient pillar nearby crumbled to dust. You were saying? Tasman asked sweetly. The officer drew a blade of moonlight, once undefeated. Now rust and memory. The war council was called. Walls and floors scorched. The blight's advance slowed only by burning and destruction. General Liarius, an elf, held a sword traded from a human. He looked at it like it might bite him. Destroying the Moonrise Gallery is barbaric, he said. Roderick answered, better that than death. Queen Serene sat armored, ready to fight. Maps showed 16 cities lost, the darkness spreading along magical ley lines. Cobb studied the patterns. The blight eats magic. It's following the veins of your power. Roderick said firmly, we must stop it before it reaches the grand convergence. Tasman trained elves and humans alike, teaching sword strikes and battle math. Elves dropped stones from towers, Dunry's artillery thundered. The blight was learning. Faster. Smarter. A new soldier, called Shovel for his weapon, held a bridge alone. His rough tool saved lives. Magic failed. Steel held. As the blight marched closer, the humans and elves prepared for war like never before. The sun had barely risen when the alarms began. Smoke curled from the outer gardens of Ezreal, the once beautiful trees now twisted and blackened. The blight had come. Captain Roderick stood at the head of the Queen's Guard, his armor scarred and dirted from weeks of constant battle. Behind him, the human knights formed a wall of steel and will. Their weapons were simple but deadly. The elves, their magic flickering uncertainly, lined up beside them, clutching newly learned swords and shields. Lady Tasman Vale rode her halberd low, watching the chaos unfold. It's not like the stories, she said. This isn't magic versus darkness. It's steel and stubbornness against something that devours both. The first wave crashed like a black tide. Shapes that might have been animals once charged forward, twisted, broken creatures with fractal antlers and eyes like holes in the world. Their bodies shimmered with a sickly darkness, hungry for destruction. Roderick raised his shield as a beast charged. The impact shook his arms, but the steel held. His sword found its mark, slicing through twisted flesh. The creature fell, dissolving into shadows. Steel works, Roderick shouted, voice hoarse. They die. You hear that? They die. But the blight did not stop. It came again and again, endless waves of shadow and hunger. Behind the first, others advanced, trees weeping black sap, branches clawing like desperate hands. Magic faltered. The elves struggled to hold their spells as darkness reached for their power. Dunry, the human engineer turned warrior, directed the makeshift artillery. Elevation 30 degrees. Account for the wind. Fire. Heavy rocks and bolts tore through the air, smashing into the enemy. When they struck solid forms, the blight screamed, a sound that chilled the bones. The creatures bled a strange black liquid, proof they were not invincible. On the front line, the human knights and elves fought side by side. Tasman moved through the battlefield, her sword wickedness flashing, cutting down anything that moved. She called out orders and encouragement, her voice fierce and unyielding. Remember. Steel doesn't care who you are. Swing hard and don't stop. A young elf, once scornful of humans, fought beside her. His armor was bloodied and dented, his face marked by fear and determination. I understand now, he gasped. Survival is not beauty. Tasman laughed, harsh and wild. Good. You'll need that. The battle lasted 6 hours. The outer gardens were gone, replaced by a shattered moonscape. But the line held. The blight was learning. It moved faster, struck harder. It even used new weapons, dark creatures shaped like twisted elves, graceful and terrible. They moved with deadly purpose. Roderick faced one such creature. It called itself Nephesis. Its voice was the sound of ending things. I am eternal. You are meat and moment. Kneel or be consumed. Roderick stood firm. We dare. Steel met shadow in a fierce clash. The creature's touch withered magic, but the human's swords cut through flesh. Slowly, painfully, the tide turned. Nephesis fell, surprised by pain and defeat. Its death broke the enemy's spirit. The blight army staggered, creatures dissolving into memories and shadow. But the war was far from over. Queen Serene, standing among warriors now, declared, we gave up eternity for this moment. We traded perfection for survival. The combined forces gathered at Thornwatch Ridge, the last defense before the Grand Convergence, the source of all elven magic. The blight advanced relentlessly. The mixed army trained like never before. Elves learned to wield steel. Humans learned elven tactics. Dunri taught geometry to young soldiers, showing how to use angles and gravity as weapons. Hit their knees, he said. Aim for the gaps. Fight ugly if you have to. The soldiers fought with grim determination. They drank bitter stew and shared stories of lost friends and hope. As the final battle drew near, the skies darkened. The blight rose like a living shadow, an endless wave of hunger and death. Roderick rallied his troops. Hold the line. We fight for tomorrow. The blight's greatest horror revealed itself, a monstrous, shifting form that consumed light and hope. The entity spoke, a voice like the void. I am the hunger between stars. Kneel or be consumed. Tasman laughed, mocking. We'll see about that. The battle was brutal. Steel against shadow, will against oblivion. The entity bled, wounded by the combined force of mortals. Roderick and Tasman fought side by side, cutting and striking, pushing the darkness back. Slowly, painfully, the seal that would stop the blight was prepared by elven scholars and human ingenuity. A patchwork magic born of desperation and stubbornness. With a final cry, the entity was trapped. The blight shrank, retreating into darkness. The survivors, bloodied but alive, looked at each other with new respect. The war was not over, but a new hope was born. Together, humans and elves would stand. The battle at Thornwatch Ridge had changed everything. The elegant, ancient city of Ezreal was scarred, its crystal towers cracked and darkened. But inside the broken walls, something new was growing, an army unlike any the world had seen. Captain Roderick stood watching the soldiers train. They were no longer just humans or elves. They were something in between, a blend of stubborn steel and graceful magic, rough edges and newfound discipline. Lady Tasman Vale shouted orders from the front lines, her voice fierce. Keep your guard up. Move as one. Steel doesn't care about bloodlines. The elves struggled at first. Many hated the roughness of the humans, their loud voices and clanking armor. Some sneered at the dirt on the ground and the hard work needed to fight without magic. But the humans taught them patience, resilience, and the strength found in simple tools and constant effort. Shovel, the young squiresmith with his entrenching tool, became a legend among them. His sharp mind and quick hands saved lives as he dug trenches and built defenses. One evening, Roderick found Tasman cleaning her sword, Wickedness, with careful hands. How do they take it? He asked quietly. Tasman smiled, tired but proud. They hate it. They hate having to be like us. But they're learning. That's what matters. In the forge, Cobb worked late into the night. His apprentice, an elf who once scorned metalwork, hammered steel with determination. The impurities make it stronger, Cobb said. Too pure and it breaks. Like people. We need a little dirt to last. The army's camp was full of strange sounds, metal on metal, training shouts, laughter mixing with groans of pain. The elves learned to cook hardtack and stew. The humans learned the songs and rituals of the elves. Slowly, a new culture was born from the clash. Queen Serene walked among them, her crown replaced by a simple helmet. She watched young elves swing swords and human knights learn to hold a shield with grace. We called it perfection for centuries, she said softly to Roderick. But it was stagnation. We polished the past until we forgot to prepare for the future. Roderick nodded. Magic alone won't save us. But steel and will might. The scouts brought grim news. The blight was healing, growing stronger again. Its shadow spread like ink, devouring everything. A young elf approached Roderick. His face was marked by battle, his eyes bright with new understanding. I would learn the way of the shovel, he said simply. Roderick smiled. Good. It's not about the shovel. It's about the work nobody sings about. The night before the next battle was quiet but tense. The soldiers shared stories and memories. Some whispered prayers. Others made jokes to hide fear. Roderick and Tasman stood on the walls, watching the stars. Think they'll remember? Tasman asked. Not the glory, Roderick said. The hard parts. The ugly truth that survival is work. That we stand together or fall alone. The dawn brought the sound of marching feet and clashing steel. The Blight's army was larger now, darker, more terrible. The combined forces formed lines, elves on the flanks, humans in the center. Dunri's artillery roared, sending stones and bolts flying. The battle was brutal. Shadows met steel, hunger met stubbornness. The earth trembled beneath the clash. The greatest enemy appeared, a vast, shifting form that bent reality itself. It spoke with the sound of silence, promising doom. But the soldiers held firm. They fought with every breath, every heartbeat. The scholars worked to complete the seal that would trap the darkness. It was not the elegant magic of old but a patchwork born of hope and sweat. Slowly, the enemy weakened. The seal snapped shut with a thunderous sound. The blight recoiled, retreating into shadow. Exhausted but alive, the soldiers looked at each other, no longer enemies, but allies. The war was far from over. The convergence still threatened. But for the first time in centuries, there was hope. Hope born not of magic, but of steel, sweat, and the stubborn refusal to surrender. The morning air was thick with smoke and cold dread as the combined army marched toward the grand convergence. The sacred place, once a gleaming jewel of elven magic, now lay scarred and broken. 3 of its 7 towers had been consumed by the blight, their crystals darkened and lifeless. Captain Roderick led the human knights in tight formation. Their steel armor was scratched and battered, but their resolve was unshaken. Beside him rode Lady Tasman, her halberd flying low and sharp-eyed, watching the dark horizon. The elves moved with a strange new purpose. Gone were the delicate dances and graceful movements they had once prized. Now they marched like soldiers, efficient, brutal, and alive. Queen Serene rode at the front, her helmet shining faintly in the pale light. She carried no illusions of grandeur, she was a warrior now, one with the mixed army that had become her people. As the forces set up camp in the natural bowl that cradled the convergence, silence fell over the land. The blight approached like a tide of black mist, swallowing sound and light. Birds ceased their songs. Even the wind held its breath. Roderick gathered his officers. This is the last line. If we fail here, magic dies forever. If magic dies, so do we. The elves who once relied on spells now clutched their swords with white knuckles. The humans tightened straps on their armor, checking blades and shields. Dunri organized his artillery, the pounding of heavy rocks echoing across the valley. Shovel and his team dug trenches and traps, geometry guiding every hole and pit. As dusk deepened, the blight revealed its full horror. Dark shapes moved through the mist, twisted beasts, corrupted trees, and worst of all, the terrible entity at their center. It was vast and shifting, a horror that bent light and sound. Its voice was the silence between stars. I am the hunger that devours worlds, it whispered. Kneel or be consumed. Tasman laughed bitterly. We'll see about that. The battle began without mercy. Steel clashed against shadow, flesh against darkness. The line held tight, each soldier fighting for the world's last hope. The entity struck with terrible power, warping reality and breaking minds. But the mixed forces pressed forward. Humans shielded elves. Elves covered humans. Shovel's trenches caught the enemy, slowing their advance. The scholars worked desperately, their magic intertwined with human craft, weaving a seal to contain the darkness once more. Roderick fought beside Tasman, their blades singing a song of survival. Around them, the soldiers moved as one, fierce and unyielding. After hours that stretched like days, the seal was ready. With a roar that shattered the night, the entity was trapped, its form crushed by the combined will of steel and magic. The blight receded, its shadows fleeing like broken dreams. The grand convergence stood, battered but alive. The survivors, bloodied and weary, gathered among the ruins. They were no longer elves or humans. They were something new. Queen Serene looked over the broken towers. "We called it perfection," she said softly, "but it was only our prison. We are free now." Roderick nodded, wiping sweat and blood from his face. "We survived because we fought together. Magic and steel. Pride and stubbornness." Tasman smiled, lifting her sword toward the dawn. "This is just the beginning." The dawn broke cold over Hollow Reach, the new settlement rising where borders once divided humans and elves. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and fresh metal, the scent of hard work and survival. Captain Roderick stood at the forge, watching Cobb and his apprentices hammer blades and shape armor. Among them was an elf who had once sneered at the dirt and noise of the smithy. Now, he worked with steady hands and quiet pride. "The impurities make it stronger," Cobb said, shaping a blade with care. "Too pure, and it breaks. People are the same. You need some dirt and scars to last." Nearby, Lady Tasman drilled young soldiers, half human, half elf, in the art of battle. "Stop thinking so much," she snapped. "Combat's like dancing. If you're counting steps, you're already dead. Feel it. React." Children played in the streets, their laughter rising over the clatter of hammer on anvil. Human and elf together, building games that would shock the purists of both races. In the command tower, Roderick met with Queen Serene and leaders of the new alliance. The seal on the blight held, fragile but real. Maintaining it was a lifetime's work, a task that would fall to many generations. "We survived by choosing life over perfection," Serene said. "By embracing change and the strength in unity." Roderick smiled. "The hardest battles are the ones you don't have to fight." At night, by the flickering light of campfires, soldiers shared stories. They remembered the fallen, the pain, and the ugly truth that survival is work, ugly, dirty, and necessary. Shovel sat apart, his entrenching tool resting across his knees. A young noble approached, scarred and changed by battle. "I want to learn," the elf said simply. "The way of the shovel." Shovel nodded slowly. "It's not about the shovel. It's about the willingness to dig. To get dirty. To do the work no song will sing." They sat in silence, watching the stars, the same stars that had looked down on the beginning of the war. The world was different now. Not perfect. Not clean. But alive. And in that truth lay the foundation of every tomorrow worth fighting for. The rust never sleeps. Neither do those who stand against it.